All right. Take number 2. 2:43, Wednesday, March 23rd, 2022. I previously recorded a segment of video and ended up losing the plot. So, unless we are making an assumption that literally all available internet information, whether it's Wikipedia, whether it's a scanned printed copy of some old textbook from 60 years ago, whatever, to assume that it is, unless we are making the assumption that it is all fake, all purely exists solely for the purpose of keeping us occupied and in control, which some of it is. I wouldn't say that all of it. It is possible to know about things, to remember things from a prior time. I know for whatever you want to call people, the average normie, just regular people with no particular special gifts, talents, or higher levels of self-awareness, apparently, even they can understand that there are some things that you remember as having happened, even if what you remember happening may have been influenced by propaganda or whatever. There are a couple of things that are very confusing on purpose in the storyline of Ukraine. And a number of contradictions. Too many contradictions for my likes. So I don't buy what they're selling. That's not to say that I don't believe that the series of contradictions exists. That is to say that I do not follow the narrative to its logical conclusion, so it claims. Because there's a real logical conclusion to what their narrative suggests, and where everyone gets called, literally, you'll get called a terrorist if you say it out loud. And if I was to state it and state the remedy, there'd be Feddies knocking on my door within a week. So, I was watching a reaction channel react to Dave Chappelle doing his juicy sommelier routine. Or act, or whatever. I don't know if he ever told that joke more than once. What we talked about in the comments a little bit was the fact that the audience was laughing the entire time from almost the moment he was telling the story. Not just because he's funny because he's Dave Chappelle, but as I explained, because part of it is an understanding between the audience and the comedian. And so a comedian telling jokes about things that people don't get, those jokes aren't funny to that crowd. So for him to say a fake name, because everybody in the crowd would already have some rudimentary understanding that if you talk about this online, your thinger gets messed with. Even though the story is that that never happened, even though it's happening. It's called gaslighting. Anyways. The thing is that he gets to the last name of this fake name, and all of a sudden everybody takes a second and they all know who he's talking about. That's where the laughter really starts, because then, as the reaction channel host states, he's just simply factually stating some things, and the crowd is laughing as he presents it in order. And yeah, there's a little bit of facial expression and vocal inflection, as it were, the way he's telling the story, because he's really good at what he does. But there's an understanding between the audience and the comedian of what is being discussed, even if that which is understood is not being discussed outright. So, a couple of things that should be understood even if they're not being discussed so that we can have a little bit of context. The areas that have troops in them for sure in Ukraine are areas that voted to separate from Ukraine. This is a fact. As far as world governments and everywhere else go, they're still considering those areas to be Ukraine. So if Ukraine bombs people in these separatist regions, then the news reports Ukrainian casualties from bombing, but they're blaming it on Russia. The people doing it in these separatist regions are the now famous neo-Nazi battalion. They're not just like a regiment of 20 troops or whatever. They are a branch that has gained clout, power in a political party. They have people in parliament and the cabinet. They control the president of that country right now, who is, by the way, Jewish. Like I said, lots of contradictions. See the other contradiction I just described without calling it a contradiction? It's the thing with the separatist regions still being referred to as Ukrainian. A lot of people in the news either don't realize or are using that to conflate, to confuse people, to get, oh, no, more Ukrainians have died. Well, maybe there were separatist areas, and I'm not saying it's okay that they died. I'm just saying that that's probably not Russia that took them out. There are also some reports I've heard of the reason that there are any civilian casualties is that the Ukrainian military is, and I don't know if it's the entire military or just that battalion. I don't know if this is happening in undisputed Ukraine or if it's happening in separatist areas that are still somewhat technically considered part of Ukraine. They're not specifying. They'll just be like, it's happening in this city and this is Ukrainians. Okay, but is that in one of the separatist regions? Are those people that don't want to be Ukrainians? Who's the one actually attacking them? There's a lot of this stuff because both countries use Cyrillic language for their writing. We can't tell which is which unless you have a slight understanding or any understanding of that language, which I really don't. I can't judge by anything I look at. I know that there is a slight difference in how Ukrainian language with Cyrillic is written versus Russian, but I don't really know the difference. I saw a picture of a bombed out city or neighborhood, or what, it was a kind of a large area. It was many blocks, like a 20 blocks by 20 blocks or bigger, that looked like it had been bombed the fuck out. But it was a black and white picture. It was from aerial view. I don't know what was there. I don't know who was there. Here's the other thing. When they keep talking about civilian casualties from Ukraine, they have a ton of refugees leaving the country. There are a ton of people that aren't from Ukraine who claim to be Ukrainians trying to leave the country. African citizens, people from African countries with fake IDs trying to cross the border. Fake IDs with pictures of white people on them even. But there are a ton of people leaving Ukraine. This has been going on from the start. So by the time now that they're like, oh, look, they just blew up, this neighborhood. Okay, number one, yeah, that sucks. A lot of houses, a lot of buildings, a lot of architecture, people's things, right? But people might have already evacuated. And the military might have been hiding out in civilian areas. Here's the thing. Samira, stop. 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 Come on. Are you hopping up? No, she's just going to do that. Where was I? Do you have anything else to say while I'm still trying to think? She was very loud. There are so many contradictions. When I was a kid in Desert Storm, this was first they had Desert Shield, and Desert Shield was when they thought that Saddam Hussein had, they claimed that he had invaded Kuwait. He was trying to take it back for Iraq. It's its own separate emirate, apparently. And it basically is the land between the rivers at the port on the Persian Gulf. It's an ultra important piece of land to control. And it's effectively Saudi controlled. And Hussein went to take it over. They sent in a ton of National Guard from America to basically protect against possible invasion of Saudi land by Iraq. Now, keep in mind, at the time, Iraq was a puppet government. The strongman had initially been put in place by our government to be able to conflict with Iran, who was a longtime enemy, even though the government of Iran was also installed by our government after their legitimate government was toppled by our government. Same as Iraq. Desert Storm was when we went into Iraq to go after Saddam Hussein because he'd apparently put a bounty out on the president or something, so they said. During that time, we were told that despicable Saddam Hussein and his minions, his soldiers, his Republican Guard, and his Iraqi army were simultaneously surrendering en masse and hiding out and attacking in civilian populated neighborhoods, and how vile it was because our soldiers couldn't get at them because there were innocent people. That was the story we were told. That is what the Ukrainian military seems to be doing, if that's actually true. Which means that neighborhood that got bombed out, or that could have been a military base or another facility that got bombed out, and the remains just look like something else. Everybody's got a sob story and an angle. I refuse to buy into any of it emotionally. Still, that country is the place where a lot of shady business involving our government's people making money and running deals to launder money, as well as international subterfuge and proxy war, was being carried out through this country. They really just are a hollow puppet, the land that used to be the capital of Russia back in the day, 100 years ago or more. So many contradictions. And when the news reports that there are Ukrainian casualties, if you see a city name listed, look that city up and find out what region it's in. If it's in one of the separatist regions, that means that those casualties were not from Russians, because Russia is not attacking. I can guarantee you that. Russia is not attacking the people, the government, or the infrastructure of those regions. Only the people who are attempting to incur into those regions, and apparently anywhere that they believe that there is anything to do with this neo-Nazi regime or anything else. That's the claim, and a lot of it seems to be backed up by actual facts. What little can be gleaned from it, reports, records, etc., that can show a fact pattern of events happening, and you can say, okay, well, I mean, if he was going in after some Nazis with the, questionable laboratories, etc., because they've infiltrated that government and they work for our government. What it all ultimately comes to is, thankfully, we, the United States, are not engaged in a war right now, because otherwise it would be illegal to say conclusively that our government is on the side of the bad guys in this one. And when it becomes wartime, if we go to war with Russia, they will pass a sedition act, a law that will be signed, and it will have gone through the bicameral Congress and everything else. And this will say that it is illegal, punishable by prison, to criticize openly the war effort or the government. Sedition Act. So until we have that, and we're not currently engaged in any sort of a declared war or having been attacked personally, directly, the country, I can say that right now, everything that is going on over there, our government are the bad guys, for sure. So anyways, this will upload once I get to work tonight, and I don't know, man. It's Wednesday. Happy Hump Day.